Well, good morning and welcome to CBS News Mornings. I'm glad you're here. It's just about 7 o'clock here on the East Coast. I'm Anne-Marie Green, and here's a look at some of the stories that are grabbing our attention right now. Thousands of American troops are now on high alert as tensions between Russia and Ukraine ramp up. Our Holly Williams is standing by in Kyiv to give us the very latest there. New York State's indoor mask mandate just got shot down after a judge said that the governor's office crossed a line. So we're going to tell you how Governor Kathy Hochul plans to fight back. And a soccer stampede killed several people in Africa. Our Ian Lee is going to have more on what caused that rush when he joins us for Worldview. That's going to happen around 7:20. Plus, have you ever worried about maybe getting caught on a work Zoom call saying something you shouldn't? Well, don't worry. The president, he understands exactly what that feels like. Our Ouija Jang is at the White House with more on what the president said on a hot mic. And no misspeaking here. Our Nancy Chen caught up with the first woman to captain one of the Navy's oldest ships.
What would you tell that young woman today?
Even if I told her that one day she would be commanding the ship, she wouldn't believe me. So I think I would just tell my younger self to just keep doing your best, and you'll find yourself in some unusual places.
So we'll have more on the inspirational story about one woman who's charting a course into history. But before all of that, new alarming moves in the escalating standoff between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. More than 8,000 American troops remain on high alert amid growing fears of a Russian invasion. We know President Biden spoke with European leaders, though, about possible diplomatic solutions. So Laura Podesta is here, joining us with the very latest developments. It looks like there's two tracks, Laura. There's the diplomatic solution, but getting ready for the possibility of an invasion.
That's right, Anne-Marie. And the Pentagon's preparation is in tandem with other NATO countries like France, which has already sent troops to Romania, which borders Ukraine. It is notable, though, that NATO has not yet made the decision to activate its response force, which consists of thousands of troops from multiple countries.
The U.S. and its NATO allies are showing a united front in the face of Russian hostility toward Ukraine.
I had a very, very, very good meeting. Total unanimity with all the European leaders.
President Biden later tweeted that in an 80-minute video call, they discussed efforts to deter further Russian aggression, like preparations to impose severe economic costs on Russia and to reinforce security on the eastern flank.
It will be swift, it will be severe. In the event of an incursion, it will be unprecedented.
Today, 8,500 U.S. troops are on alert, ready to deploy to Eastern Europe within 5 days if the situation deteriorates.
We are not deploying them now. We are not saying diplomacy is dead.
The French, Dutch, and Danes have already sent jets and troops.
We will always do what is necessary to protect and defend all our allies.
Russia denounced the move and denies it has any plans to invade Ukraine. But the former Soviet superpower has nearly 130,000 troops along the border. Russia wants assurances that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO, something Mr. Biden addressed last week.
The likelihood that Ukraine is going to join NATO in the near term is not very likely.
Russian President Vladimir Putin also wants a promise that NATO won't put strategic weapons in Ukraine.
Now, one potential deterrent to war, although it's temporary, is the Beijing Winter Olympics, Anne-Marie, which start next week. Experts say that Putin would not want to take attention away from his ally, as the Olympics would be China's moment to shine on the world stage. However, we should note that Russia did attack Georgia shortly before the Summer Olympics in China in 2008.
Laura, let's go back to these, more than 8,000 U.S. troops on standby here. Do we have any indication when they would be sent to Eastern Europe, whether it's a timeline or, they're waiting to see if Russia does anything?
Yes, it comes down to the outcome of one additional diplomatic talks. If they fail and if Russia attacks Ukraine, we will very quickly see the movement of those 8,500 U.S. troops to Eastern Europe and to the Baltics. Now, it's also possible that we'll see the dispatch of 40,000 troops, the NATO response force, which is comprised of soldiers from all NATO nations.
Now, so far we've been talking about the conversations between Russia and the U.S., but what about the U.S. and Ukraine? What additional aid is the U.S. offering Ukraine? How are they getting that aid there?
The aid that the U.S. is providing Ukraine is three-pronged. It's one, you have funding. You have $600 million that the U.S. has pledged to Ukraine in recent months. Two, you have the military equipment. The U.S. has authorized NATO countries to transfer weapons to Ukraine, and those weapons were originally made in the U.S. And three, like you mentioned, you have this diplomatic aid. When the commander-in-chief of the United States, the most powerful country in the world, is coming out in strong support of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, that's some big influence that weighs heavily on the decisions of the other member nations of NATO on how they should vote in order to react to this Russian aggression. And Putin, when considering his next moves, is also going to be factoring in this support carefully as well, because Putin knows an attack on Ukraine will likely mean substantial economic and geopolitical repercussions for Russia.
Yeah, there are risks for Russia as well. Laura Podesta, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, the future of the Oath Keepers leader, Stewart Rhodes, hangs in the balance as a federal judge decides whether to release him from custody. And this comes as he awaits trial over his alleged role in the January 6th insurrection. Scott McFarland has the latest.
In the courthouse in Plano, Texas, prosecutors accused Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes of using force to stop the peaceful transfer of power and said he must remain in jail pending trial. Lawyers revealed that Rhodes, the alleged coordinator of the Oath Keepers' assault on the Capitol, is also cooperating with the January 6th committee, making him the latest key figure to do so. CBS News has confirmed the committee is investigating a draft executive order circulated by some in the Trump administration that would have ordered the Pentagon to seize voting machines from several battleground states where they alleged fraud took place.
We are concerned that our military was part of this big lie on promoting that the election was false.
The order, which was never signed by former President Trump, would have also involved the Department of Justice. Thompson revealed Sunday that former Attorney General Bill Barr has had a voluntary conversation with the committee.
So if you are using the military to potentially seize voting machines, even though it's a discussion, the public needs to know. We've never had that before.
Meanwhile, a court in Georgia has granted a local prosecutor's request for a special grand jury to investigate whether the former president interfered in Georgia's 2020 election results. Mr. Trump has referred to that as a political witch hunt. Scott McFarland, CBS News, Washington.
Well, the Supreme Court can now add affirmative action to its long list of high-profile and divisive cases on the agenda. The justices agreed to take up lawsuits claiming that Harvard and the University of North Carolina discriminate against Asian American applicants. If the court decides against the schools, it could mean the end of affirmative action in college admissions. Now, lower courts had rejected the cases, citing decades of rulings that allow colleges and universities to consider race in admissions, as long as it's done in a way that promotes diversity. In just a few hours, the federal trial involving 3 former Minneapolis police officers accused of violating George Floyd's civil rights is set to resume. Mola Lenghi is in St. Paul, Minnesota, with the latest.
I can't breathe. You're doing fine. You're talking fine.
Prosecutors said the 3 officers didn't lift a finger when George Floyd said he couldn't breathe at least 25 times, while Derek Chauvin kneeled on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes.
I can't move.
In their opening statements, prosecutors insisted it was more about what the 3 former Minneapolis police officers did not do than what they did. That 2 officers, Tu Tao and Alex King, failed in their duty of stopping a police officer they see using excessive force. Tao, King, and Thomas Lane are charged with denying Floyd's civil rights by not providing the first aid that could have kept him alive.
What they're trying to say is that Chauvin did it all on his own, and they, meaning the other defendants, were not trying to help Mr. Chauvin violate Mr. Floyd's rights.
Just gonna let him keep his hand on his neck, bro?
Prosecutors allege during Floyd's deadly arrest in May of 2020, Tao held bystanders back while King kneeled on Floyd's back for 8 minutes and Lane held down Floyd's legs. Lane can be heard twice asking Derek Chauvin if they should reposition Floyd. Another defense attorney, Thomas Plunkett, called Floyd's death a failure by the Minneapolis Police Department and a lack of adequate training.
When you use that argument, it's almost like you're saying, yes, this is true, he did it, but he wasn't properly trained.
Thomas Lane and Alex King were relatively new to the Minneapolis Police Department. They'd been on patrol for less than a week when George Floyd was killed. Thomas Lane's attorney says that Lane will testify in his own defense, though it's unclear if the other two officers or if Derek Chauvin will testify in this trial. Mola Lengi, CBS News, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Well, remember, you can follow this trial from anywhere. Just download our free CBS News app. There, you can check out all of our CBS News national and local streams, including CBS News Minnesota on demand. Well, a tragedy in Baltimore, where an investigation is underway after 3 firefighters died while responding to a call yesterday. Officials say that they were trapped under burning debris while battling a fire in an abandoned row house. A 4th firefighter remains on life support in critical but stable condition. It's the first time firefighters have died on the job in Baltimore since 2014. President Biden could order troops to Eastern Europe as tensions soar at the Russian-Ukrainian border. So Holly Williams is following the latest in the region, and she's going to have a full report after the break. And a crisis is underway in Burkina Faso, where soldiers have seized power and ousted the president in West Africa's latest coup. The details coming up next. But first, it is 7:10 on the East Coast. Time to check your local weather.
Hey CBS News, congrats on your new home and your new look. Don't forget to Instagram it. It'll make your ex so jealous.
Well, the time now is 9:15 p.m. in Tokyo. You're looking at an area that's been fondly called Japan's version of Times Square. Not incredibly busy right now, but it's hard to tell. Of course, it's 7:15 a.m. here all along the East Coast. CBS News Mornings is back with a look at some of the stories that you may have missed while you were offline. One of the most powerful and corrupt New York politicians has died. Sheldon Silver spent the last years of his life in prison after being found guilty of federal corruption charges. Silver was 77 years old. Newly revealed autopsy results show that Lauren Smithfield's death was an accident caused by drugs and alcohol. The 23-year-old woman was found dead in her apartment in Connecticut last month by the man that she had been on a date with the night before. Now, Smithfield's family says that there was foul play involved and has ordered an independent autopsy. And 7 U.S. military members are hurt after a Navy fighter jet crashed on the deck of an aircraft carrier yesterday. It happened during routine flight operations in the South China Sea. The cause of the crash is under investigation. And now we are turning back to the situation at Ukraine's border, as U.S. officials fear that Moscow could launch an invasion at any time. Holly Williams is in Kyiv with more.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Well, amidst these escalating tensions, the U.S. government is warning that Russia could target America with a cyber attack. And that comes as no surprise to us because we've been reporting on Russian aggression here in Ukraine since 2014 and the many different forms that it's taken.
Причин для паніки.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told his people last night not to panic as NATO deploys fighter jets, troops and ships to reinforce defences in Eastern Europe. Russia still claims it has no plans to invade Ukraine. But roughly 100,000 Russian troops are now massed along Ukraine's border. The question for Ukrainians is not just if Russia will attack, but how. Russia's invaded Ukraine before, seizing control of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014. But the US is warning that Russia could use more secretive tactics.
And paramilitary tactics, so-called gray zone attacks, and actions by Russian soldiers not wearing Russian uniforms.
Russia already stands accused of that in eastern Ukraine. We witnessed Russian-backed separatists take control of towns and cities in 2014.
Can you tell me, are you Ukrainian or are you Russian?
I'm just a person.
You're just a person.
Yes.
You won't tell me.
No.
That conflict's now killed more than 14,000. The US says Russia controls the armed rebels. Suspected Russian hackers have also succeeded in crashing the power grid in parts of Ukraine. When this power station came under attack in 2015, nearly 250,000 people lost electricity.
There are still hopes that diplomacy can resolve these tensions. Russia's President Vladimir Putin and the French President Emmanuel Macron will speak on the phone in the coming days. Anne-Marie?
Holly, on that meeting that's planned for tomorrow, just what potential outcomes could follow? Is there really still a chance for diplomacy at this point?
Well, look, wheels are still turning. There's the phone call between Putin and Macron. There's a meeting scheduled for tomorrow between Ukrainian, Russian, French and German officials in Paris. And also this week, we're expecting written responses from the US to Russia's security concerns. That came out of the meeting last week between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. So they're still going through the motions of diplomacy. What we can't know is whether all sides are taking it seriously or just going through the motions.
You know, from where we are here, it certainly seems like Russia is inching towards some sort of invasion. But I'm wondering if you're getting the sense there from the people on the ground. I mean, I know they still have to sort of live their daily lives, but are they as convinced as it seems the rest of the world is that Russia wants to invade Ukraine?
You know, Anne-Marie, it's really interesting because on the streets here, you don't really notice anything abnormal. People are still going to work. There are still traffic jams. Children are still going to school. People are still praying in that historic cathedral just behind me. So life looks like it's going on pretty much as normal. But I think there's a couple of things to remember. One is that Ukrainians have lived with Russian aggression now for many years. You know, the invasion of Crimea, the war in the east. So they're kind of used to the idea of it hanging over them. This is certainly not the first time they've had tens of thousands of Russian troops massed on their border. And the second thing is, although they may fear an attack, they can't know what form that attack, will take. Could it be a full-blown invasion? Could it be a smaller incursion? Could it be cyber attacks? We can't know. And if you can't know, you can't plan. It's beyond your control. So when you talk to people here, they're definitely worried. They're definitely anxious for the most part, but it's not really changing their behavior.
Yeah, that is actually quite fascinating. Holly Williams, thank you very much. Breaking news out of the UK, where police are looking into events held at number 10 Downing Street during COVID lockdown. So Ian Lee is keeping an eye on this as well as other international stories for us. Ian, good morning.
Good morning, Emery. Yeah, it seems like every day there's a new revelation about what was happening there while the rest of us were in lockdown. And now British police say they will investigate the parties held at the Prime Minister's office during that time. And they'll be looking into possible breaches of COVID-19 regulations across the government. Now, several parties with alcohol took place during that time, but Boris Johnson has brushed them off as a, quote, work event. Now let's move on to some other stories we're following. Naval drills held by Iran, China, and Russia happened last Friday. This is the third time the countries have held joint exercises. The latest round was held in the northern part of the Indian Ocean. The drills included various scenarios, including rescuing a ship on fire, storming a hijacked vessel, and shooting at air targets at night. Now, the three countries started conducting joint exercises back in 2019. Iranian state media says their purpose is to strengthen security in the region and expand multilateral cooperation. This is part of Tehran's pursuit of, quote, looking east and to deepen ties with China and Russia. It is also presented as a counter to the American presence in the region. Next, we have a tragic accident at the ongoing African Cup of Nations in Cameroon yesterday. At least 8 people are dead and dozens more injured after a stampede during what's known as the biggest and most popular soccer tournament on the continent. Video showed fans being crushed to death at the gates leading into the stadium. Witnesses described the chaotic scene as thousands of fans tried to surge inside. And because of COVID restrictions, the stadium was only supposed to be 80% full. The Confederation of African Football said that they're going to be investigating the incident. We now have an update to a story we've been following. Soldiers in Burkina Faso declared on state TV yesterday that they deposed the government, closed the borders, and have taken control of the country. President Roch Kabore has also reportedly been arrested, and his whereabouts right now are currently unknown. In the 24 hours leading up to the coup, thousands of protesters took to the streets demanding Kabore's resignation. There is anger over his perceived failure to tackle an Islamist insurgency. Over 1 million people have been displaced in the country, with at least 2,000 killed in that fighting. Finally, we are in Italy, where the first round of voting for the president has failed to deliver a winner. Now, Parliament selects the leader of the country, but the election received an avalanche of blank ballots yesterday amid political paralysis. Party leaders are still struggling to find a candidate who can unite the country and rise above the partisan politics. That person needs to get a 2/3 majority to win. A second round of voting will take place this afternoon, but expectations are low that someone will emerge victorious. Emery, there's a lot of horse trading going on behind the scenes between allies and rivals to find that one person who can secure the supermajority. While the position is largely ceremonial, it's still an important one because the president is seen as someone who can steer the country through chaos and different political crises. But if the vote goes to a fourth round on Thursday, then all that person needs is a simple majority to win.
And then just to add another layer to this, because it's Italy and it's politics, the current prime minister wants to be the president. In fact, he's the leading contender, but then if he wins, well, who's going to be the prime minister? There's layers to this.
A whole other can of worms.
Yeah, totally. Ian, thank you very much. Well, President Biden had a few choice words for one White House reporter. Find out what the president said under his breath on a hot mic. That's coming up next. Until then, we're going to take a quick break, which means that you have 3 minutes or so to download the free CBS News app on all your devices. Our app gives you the best of CBS News all in one place, and while you're at it, check out Paramount Plus. We've got a mountain of content for you to stream right there as well, including your favorite Viacom CBS shows and movies, plus sports. And our new monthly show, Person to Person with Norah O'Donnell, premieres tonight. The first episode features a woman whose life is dedicated to getting people to talk about their emotions. Brene Brown.
Do we have the tools, the language to truly connect with one another?
I think there are limits. I think we do have some of them, and obviously we are connecting with other people, but I think we need language that is as expansive as our experiences.
Person to Person with Norah O'Donnell is an interview series where Norah sits down with authors, celebrities, athletes, and newsmakers for an intimate conversation that goes beyond the headlines. You can see more tonight when the show premieres at 10:30 Eastern, or stream it on demand on the CBS News app. Welcome back to CBS News Mornings. The time now is 7:30. Let's get you caught up on some of the news you may have missed. More than 8,000 American troops are on standby for possible deployment to Eastern Europe right now. The order comes amid growing fears that Russia will invade Ukraine. And New York Supreme Court blocked the state's indoor mask mandate. A judge ruled that Governor Kathy Hochul's temporary order was unlawful, and he said only the state legislature can enact the mandate. Well, you know, these showdowns over mask mandates have erupted nationwide, especially in Virginia, where 7 school districts have sued Governor Glenn Youngkin. They're outraged after he signed an executive order overruling their own policies by making masks optional in classrooms. So Meg Oliver is following that story from Arlington, Virginia.
There's a face-off over face coverings in Virginia public schools after the governor's executive order letting parents opt out of school mask mandates took effect today.
It's parents that should decide the health measures taken for their children.
And many parents agree. A group of them in Stafford County arrived at their children's elementary school with the intent to send them in without masks. Despite the district's policy, 6 families were turned away and offered virtual lessons instead.
There is no doubt that masks have played a role in our children's lack of education, and those masks are directly impacting their ability to learn.
But 7 county school boards have filed a lawsuit against Governor Youngkin, seeking to block the executive order. The lawsuit represents more than 350,000 students across Virginia, arguing that the state constitution gives local school boards the authority to enact policies that protect the health and well-being of students and staff. It also cites a state law requiring school systems to follow CDC health guidelines, which recommends universal masking in schools regardless of vaccination status. Amber Bomer, one of 13 parents in a separate lawsuit, has long COVID and asthma.
We are fighting for all of the children of Virginia and all of the teachers and the parents and all of the immunocompromised individuals who work and attend the schools within our school system.
Chris Wilson, a father of 2, also supports mask mandates.
Not a problem, and the kids support it. They know it's the right thing to do. We also know this is not a forever decision. This is a temporary decision.
Here in Virginia, the lawsuits ask the mask mandate remain in place until the court reaches a decision. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, students were required to upgrade their mandatory masks to something other than non-cloth with a nose wire. Meg Oliver, CBS News, Arlington, Virginia.
So turning back to the growing tensions between Russia and Ukraine, at least 8,500 U.S. troops are now on standby awaiting possible deployment to Eastern Europe. And this comes as President Biden faces more questions from members of Congress about his plan. Weijia Jiang is following the latest at the White House, and she's joining me now with more on all of this. Weijia, good morning.
Good morning to you, Anne-Marie, and good morning to everybody. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have requested that the White House give all members a briefing about the situation in Russia. Now, the White House has not confirmed yet whether that will happen, but it says that potential troop deployment was always part of contingency planning and not in direct response to any specific action by Russia.
I had a very, very, very good meeting, total unanimity with all the European leaders.
From the Situation Room, President Biden had an 80-minute video call with European allies on ways to respond if Russia invades Ukraine. The Pentagon has ordered 8,500 U.S.-based troops on higher alert to possibly deploy to NATO's eastern flank, and some American forces who are stationed within Europe may be called on to assist. It's not just a military offensive the U.S. is on alert for. In a new bulletin to law enforcement partners nationwide, the Department of Homeland Security warned that if Russia feels threatened by a U.S. or NATO response to a potential invasion, it may conduct a cyber attack against the U.S., from low-level denials of service to destructive attacks targeting critical infrastructure. So far, the administration has not imposed preemptive sanctions with hopes that diplomacy prevails. President Biden is also under mounting pressure to revive his domestic agenda and deal with rising prices. A recent CBS News poll found the majority of Americans disapprove of how the president has handled the economy and inflation. On Monday, when a Fox News reporter asked him a question about inflation, Mr. Biden fired off an insult.
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
That Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy tells me that about an hour later, President Biden called him up to clear the air. He said the president told him it's nothing personal, and they talked about moving forward. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, well, because the president knows that part of the job of the media is to ask him some uncomfortable, tough questions, and his job is to answer them, right? But let's get back to the topic that we've been talking about. So 8,500 troops on standby. You say, it's really part of a contingency plan. But I'm wondering if the administration has discussed anything other than military action. I know sanctions are out there, but beyond sanctions and military action to intervene should Russia make a move, is there anything else?
Well, should Russia make a move, that changes the game significantly. And we don't know really what else is in store. Right now, the focus is deterring Russia to prevent that from happening and to plan ahead in case it does. And that is why there's been so much talk about a severe sanctions package, about, beefing up that eastern flank in the case that there is an all-out invasion. Now, if Russia were to invade, I think the administration has indicated that at this point, it's too early to talk about what the response would be, because they don't know how severe Russia would attack, right? Yeah. So I think that, at this point, they believe through diplomacy and dialogue, they can get something done to prevent Russia from getting to that point. But Anne-Marie, there's really been no indication that Putin is pulling back. I mean, those nearly 130,000 troops are still stationed right on the border of Ukraine.
Well, so that's the thing. And you mentioned in your story that there's no plan for preemptive sanctions. So then my question is, then when do you implement these sanctions? After there's an invasion or some sort of military move, it seems like that would be a little late for sanctions. So what are the guidelines here?
That's precisely what several Republican members of Congress are saying. They want the president to take action now, to really send a message and say, if you implement these sanctions, it really shows Vladimir Putin where your power is. And if he doesn't ultimately act, then you can lift those sanctions. But the administration views it the other way around. And they believe that if they go ahead and impose sanctions, then there's no reason for Putin not to engage in escalated aggression, because he's already been punished. So that is why the White House continues to say that they are holding off for now. They're also very clear, though, Anne-Marie, that should Russia invade, that those sanctions are ready to go.
And of course, we know that attacks come in all forms. And the U.S. government is warning that, Russia could stage a cyber attack against the U.S. if they feel like the U.S. is moving towards or NATO is more open to Ukraine becoming a member, or if they feel like, what we're dealing with now has caused them too much trouble. What can you tell us about what the concerns are in regards to a cyber attack on the U.S.?
Well, we know that the Department of Homeland Security issued a bulletin to all law enforcement partners around the country that there is a heightened state of awareness that this could very well happen if Russia feels like there's a threat to its national security. But the Secretary of DHS told CBS News it's really difficult to gauge the likelihood of this, but they do believe that it is something that could very well happen because Russia has already done this. Just last week, there was a massive cyber attack on Ukraine that took down some key government websites. And we have seen in this country proxies by Russia, different actors, state actors carry out some pretty intense cyber attacks that impacted the infrastructure of our country. You'll remember last year there was a slew of them, and there were meat processing industries, waterway companies, things that really impact everyone's day-to-day that were impacted. So the government knows full well that Russia has the tools to carry this out. Mm-hmm. The question is what would actually prompt a cyber attack, because certainly, again, the U.S. has made clear that any attacks on U.S. would be retaliated.
Mm-hmm. Weijia Jiang, thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, at least 27 lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have called on House leaders to ban members of Congress from owning or trading stocks while in office. They argue that the current law preventing lawmakers from trading on non-public information is insufficient. The IRS has sent letters to millions of families about their child tax credits that may have included incorrect information. Now, the error could have a severe impact on some families' finances as people begin filing their 2021 taxes. But our top story is all about the stock market. The S&P 500, Dow Jones, and NASDAQ rebounded yesterday afternoon after plunging in early trading, dipping into so-called correction territory. This comes as the Federal Reserve begins its first policy meeting of the year today. Stephen Gendel is here to discuss all of this. He is the news editor for the New York Times Deal Book. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, this is like, it has been a roller coaster ride. Now, I'm not a big stock person, but of dabble here and there. And when I opened up the app yesterday, it was a bloodbath. It was a sea of red, and then I closed it very quickly. What are we expecting to see on Wall Street today? And what do yesterday's moves, or whatever, say about the stock market's sort of overall health here? What's going on, essentially?
So this morning, it looks like stocks are headed down again. So another shift, right? We had down yesterday, midday things seemed to change. They went way up again, and now we're headed back down this morning. The thing is that there's nothing really it's very specific to point to say what changed the mood in the stock market midday yesterday and what's changing the mood this morning. And that's really what's got people the most concerned. Uncertainty, the ground underneath investors' feet, which has been firm for most of the pandemic, right? It's amazing how much stocks have gone up given kind of what's going on in the world out there. That's shifted and feels a lot less firm than it used to.
The other thing, I said it was a sea of red. It was red until it was pink. And pink is the cryptocurrency. I don't even know why I invested in crypto. I don't even understand cryptocurrency. But anyways, I wanted to be in with the cool kids. So the cryptocurrency was all pink because it was going down too. What's been going on with cryptocurrency? And is it linked to what we're seeing in the market?
The promise of cryptocurrency was that it wasn't going to be linked, right? That it was this other, inflation proof and other things. And we've seen that that's not so much true. But the other thing going on is the recent kind of amazing run. If you remember, maybe a year ago it was 30,000 and then it was 60,000. Now we're back to 30,000. And part of that amazing run is a lot of new technologies, a lot of new usage, a lot of new companies popping out to do something in crypto. Now, to do that, they need financing. And that financing, again, is often tied to the interest rates that are set by the Fed. And if the Fed's out there saying we're going to slow things, that means less money to innovate and invest everywhere, as well as in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. Sorry.
All right, Stephen Gundell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to check in with our Times Square studio and see the CBS Mornings team. Good morning, Gail. What's coming up?
Good morning to you, Anne Marie. It's good to be with you. Your words. Ahead on CBS Mornings, we'll discuss the confusion around COVID masking with a scientist who calls himself the mask nerd to help you get the best protection against the virus. And our Bill of the Month series shows you how to avoid surprise emergency room charges. Hear how one man was charged more than $1,000, even though no doctor actually cared for his son. How'd that happen? We'll see at 8 o'clock, straight out.
Much of the country is bracing for another round of extremely frigid temperatures. We'll have more on the winter weather and what you can expect as you begin your day with a full forecast after the break. On Red and Blue, we're following the latest developments surrounding the House Committee's January 6th investigation. Newt Gingrich is weighing in with some controversial comments. Plus, lawmakers continue to target former President Trump's inner circle with subpoenas. Stream that conversation at 6 p.m. Eastern. Harsh winter weather is threatening Americans all across the country this week. Arctic air and heavy snow are in the forecast for parts of the U.S. from the Great Plains all the way to the Northeast. Larissa Abreu from CBS News Philly is tracking the winter weather for us. Good morning, Larissa.
All right, so here we are. We are looking at the lower 48. And conditions across the region, across the Northeast region are okay, but we are currently tracking what is a winter storm across parts of the middle of the country. This is going to bring slippery conditions out towards places like Denver, Colorado, back towards Nebraska. And that's that little blip of blue that you see here across the middle of the country. We move to the south and east where an area of low pressure has developed along the coast. That's what's generating a little rain from Louisiana, hugging Florida as well. And you can see the Florida Panhandle all the way out towards Tampa. That's where we do anticipate for a few scattered showers.
Larissa, thank you. NASA has taken another giant leap after installing its best set of eyes in deep space. The James Webb telescope arrived at its final destination yesterday, 1 million miles away from Earth. That's roughly 4 times farther than the moon. The telescope actually cost $10 billion, But NASA says that the images it produces will be priceless. Their mission is to look into the universe's past and better understand the Big Bang, the birth of the universe. From deep space to the open seas, for the first time in its 224-year history, the USS Constitution has a woman as commander. Nancy Chen sat down with Commander Farrell to talk about her history-making role.
Launched in 1797 as one of the Navy's 6 original frigates, the USS Constitution's history is American history.
It is an honor to introduce Commander B.J. Farrell.
And now a new order, as Commander Billy Farrell becomes the first woman to serve as captain.
There's only 76 other people in history that have commanded this ship.
And now you're going to be the 77th.
Correct. So it's an amazing feeling.
The 39-year-old was second in command of a guided missile cruiser before her new assignment. President George Washington ordered the ship to be built, and only men have been in charge until now. The Constitution still sails at least once a year. A third of its active duty crew, women.
It's such a special opportunity, not just for the ship, but the Navy as a whole, especially having all the public here. They get to see that there's a female leading us.
Docked in Boston, the ship hosts more than 500,000 visitors annually. As a teenager, Farrell was one of them.
What would you tell that young woman today?
Even if I told her that one day she would be commanding the ship, she wouldn't believe me. So I think I would just tell my younger self to just keep doing your best, and you'll find yourself in some unusual places.
Taking the helm and commanding a new course in history. Nancy Chen, CBS News, Boston.
Well, the time now is 7:53. Here's a look at what's on tap for the rest of the day. President Biden is expected to deliver a pre-recorded speech focused on health equality and racial justice in the healthcare field. We're going to have full coverage at around 1:30 Eastern this afternoon. And some students in Washington, D.C. are planning to walk out today. They're pushing for remote learning and demanding safer learning conditions amid the spread of the Omicron variant. Coming up tonight, the 2022 National Baseball Hall of Fame class will be announced. Of course, we'll have full coverage of who made that list. And before all of that, be sure to stream us at 9:45 Eastern. Vlad and I will be recapping all of the latest highlights from a truly insane NFL playoff weekend. James Brown joins us to break down all of the games and a preview of the upcoming showdowns. So if you're heading out the door, take us with you. You can access all of our CBS News national and local streams for free, anytime, anywhere, on the CBS News app. CBS Mornings is next. I'll see you in about an hour.